Before we go all the way back, I want to start by taking us back just a bit. One of their best performing and probably most entertaining videos so far. As great and as fun and honestly pretty informative as that video was, called out the whole production for being void of virtually any criticism of the Cybertruck, which honestly hasn't aged too well. Decade. And they're taken through the whole BS thing that journalists are taken through, and the company they're working for wants to keep getting that kind of early access. There is a sort of pressure to make not only an entertaining piece that gets lots of clicks, but yeah, you can't be completely unbiased in a situation like that. You just can't, and that's pretty clear now looking back. There is no mention in that flashy Haggerty video of the failed promises surrounding the Cybertruck, of the glaring safety concerns and just silly design choices, the dishonest way that they pitted the Cybertruck in a race against a vehicle that weighs thousands of pounds more, and just a lack of critical analysis around the vehicle as a real-life vehicle that actual people are going to use and deal with. Just go rewatch that Haggerty video now. Every single part of it feels like a giant Tesla infomercial. And so there's a reason that Marquise Brownlee's much more boring but critical video got 5 times the views of the Haggerty one. Aside from the fact that Marquise Brownlee has such a massive following, it is a more helpful and better review. I'm sorry, it just is. Despite having spent time with Elon himself, Marquise is unwilling to put his integrity at all to the side for anyone, and that's why people love him. It literally sucks as a pickup. Yeah, the pickup was fine. Yes, it hasn't changed much in the last 75 years because it doesn't really need to, and whatever this is, it isn't the future of trucks because it isn't all that good at anything truck related. It's not really that durable, not necessarily reliable, it isn't all that good off-road, it's not good at towing heavy things or just carrying crap, and it will give you the worst range anxiety you can imagine. And in the Haggerty video, immediately after this bit about Elon rethinking the truck, they just go and drag race it and spend a bunch of time pretty much just racing it. I don't get it. And there's so much more in that video. You know, Jason points out that Tesla's consistently dropping their prices, which isn't exactly true, but he also fails to point out that this gigantic failed promise of a vehicle that is the Cybertruck now costs double what Elon promised. That gigantic extra battery that takes up most of the bed to get over that 300-mile range mark. Oh, and he said it would float. Meanwhile, it has some of the worst panel gaps I've ever seen on a production vehicle. And he knew that the panel gaps could potentially be a problem, which is why he promised some bullcrap about the panels having 10 microns of tolerances, which is just ludicrous. The only thing that was under-promised, not surprisingly, was the 0 to 60, which of course, we've got to have this gigantic tank be one of the fastest vehicles in the world. It's so stupid. It's 2.6 seconds for the 0 to 60 instead of 2.9. This will all make sense in a minute. The most random claim was that it would come with an onboard air compressor, which would be kind of cool, but it didn't. Of course, it would be full self-driving, which he had promised at like every single unveil, and that crap's never going to happen. And it would start at $39,900 with no incentives. When in reality, if you want a Cybertruck, the price starts at over $80,000 and you'll never get it delivered. Like seriously, this truck's going to be discontinued. Fast forward about 4 years, and the first Cybertruck delivery is happening, and we get another Cybertruck live event, this time to celebrate the production of the vehicle. Out of the 2 Cybertruck events, the original unveil and the recent delivery, I think most would point to the armor glass incident as, you know, the funniest or most ridiculous moment. But for me, it's the part where this silly, very Tesla-esque promo that plays before this second delivery, it's the part where it switches from this futuristic crap to this traditional, like, truck commercial with shots of blue-collar workers using the Cybertruck as a truck. What the heck? But that lasts for like 7 seconds before getting back to the, you know, the yuppie crap. In the recent delivery event, the tagline is more utility than a truck, faster than a sports car. And that's the tagline that Elon, for some reason, he can't get it quite right.
Something that's more truck than truck. And so what we have here is something that is a better truck than a truck, while also being a better sports car than a sports car.
What does that mean? In terms of the sports car part, in my opinion, the places where Tesla did end up succeeding on some level with the Cybertruck is unsurprisingly here. That's what Tesla is good at. Now, Tesla's definition of a sports car has always been a bit off the traditional definition. Teslas aren't really sports cars. They just aren't. they don't put up good lap times, right? And they certainly don't follow the long tradition of offering, that kind of raw sports car feel. They're not that kind of fun. They're more like modern muscle cars. Incredibly fast in a straight line, 0 to 60, off the line. Of course, they're going to beat everything, right? And that's true of the Cybertruck. So no, it's not faster than a 911, even in a straight line. But again, my understanding is the Cybertruck is somewhat revolutionary in terms of a truck with its car-ish performance, things like steer-by-wire. But how is it as a truck? Let's talk about the design. I want to address some of these claims about the Cybertruck's apparently revolutionary frame design. It seems like Elon was kind of hesitantly claiming that this would be something like a monocoque frame versus a body-on-frame, but he doesn't come outright and say that. Like, he doesn't say this is a monocoque. He does say it's an exoskeleton. What are we even looking at with the Cybertruck? Like, how is it put together? Top Gear called it an exoskeleton. Others have said it's essentially a unibody. The question is, are those steel panels actually load-bearing, as Elon seemed to promise? The truth is, the Cybertruck seems to be just a unibody construction with no floor, same as the Model Y, which is pretty cool for a truck, honestly, but far from being an exoskeleton. That form is technically possible on vehicles, but that would be quite radical for a production vehicle, and especially this kind of vehicle. Tesla has done some pretty cool stuff when it comes to frame design and integrating the large batteries in with the car's frame, and that is true with the Cybertruck, but it's not an exoskeleton. The panels don't seem to be load-bearing. The Cybertruck is pretty much just like a gigantic Model Y in terms of its frame design. Now, for the overall styling of the Cybertruck, Musk has said that there was a heavy inspiration from the Lotus E-Spirit submarine car thing from the movie The Spy Who Loved Me, as well as vehicles in Blade Runner and just the whole Blade Runner aesthetic. Now, there's no mention of the DeLorean for some reason, but come on, the DeLorean is an obvious inspiration, along with just the wedge designs in general. This fits into the wedge aesthetic from the 70s and 80s. And one of the great influences on these Italian wedge designs that the Cybertruck kind of seems to be emulating is Giugiaro, which I'm terrible at pronouncing his name, but it's something like that. He's the designer of the DeLorean and the Lotus E-Spirit, and he commented on the Cybertruck's design, saying that when you step outside of the norms, it's almost always seen as a provocation. The Cybertruck will surely be successful. I'm convinced it will find its admirers. Now, I'm not one to disagree with Giugiaro. Normally, I would applaud such a bold departure from the norm in terms of design. If you've watched my channel, you've probably heard me whine about how boring modern automotive design is. But good lord, if you're gonna break out of the norm, at least make something appealing, because you're now kind of free to use those old school, beautiful design languages. If we can apparently now just use like hard metals, again with sharp edges on our cars, then make us like a classically styled vehicle, not this thing. Now let's put the Cybertruck design in the context of not only trucks, but automotive history in general, because I think this is a bit misunderstood. This is something I haven't really heard spelled out. I believe that the Cybertruck is part of a specific design type from history that is rarely pulled off well, at least in the car world, and I don't really think is pulled off all that well here. I'm talking about retro design. I recently made a video about the retro car boom of the 2000s, if you guys want to learn more about this. These were cars that were made with old design language in mind, made to look old in at least some sense. And though the Cybertruck is a unique approach to this trend, it is a retro vehicle. More specifically, retro-futuristic. Anyone who tells you that this is a purely futuristic concept the way that Tesla wants to present it is crazy. It doesn't really look like your average futuristic concept vehicle. It looks much more old school. So there's this story that Elon tells about his son coming to him and asking him why the future doesn't look like the future. And that's why there's this tagline for the recent delivery event for the Cybertruck, "The future should look like the future." Now, the obvious response to his son's question is this: well, son, we don't know what the future will look like. That's it. We don't know. And the future rarely ends up being what we think it will be. And when it comes to automotive design, the future is based heavily on regulations and trends, and it even relates to political and cultural events, artistic trends. We don't know what's coming in the future, so we can't really know what automotive design will be. It's complicated. It's entirely unknown. And whenever manufacturers have tried to make cars that have designs from the future, they're almost never correct. Think the futuristic American designs from the 50s or the Italian wedge cars from the 70s and 80s. This design looks much more like what manufacturers in, say, the 80s thought that the future would look like, and Blade Runner is a perfect example of this. The Cybertruck is a bold retro design. That's it. It's what the future was supposed to look like when Elon was a kid growing up. And in person, having seen about 6 or so Cybertrucks, it's not really an appealing design, even if the whole idea was executed well, but it isn't really executed all that well. The Cybertruck looks cool from about 2 angles. Otherwise, it looks like a gigantic hotel ice machine on wheels. The proportions are way off. It's a total eyesore, and it's funny and crazy when we see one now, but it won't be in 6 months. It will be the laughingstock of all vehicles, worse than the original Hummer or any of the horrible retro vehicles from the early 2000s, especially when there's millions of them on the road. And if you buy one because you think people will think you're cool, that's not going to work out too well. In terms of trucks, though, how does it stand up to the current crop of what's available? And I'm not talking about drag racing. I don't care about drag racing. Jesus. For towing, it's pretty comparable, at least when it's pitted against other electric trucks. But God, if you're towing in any form, honestly, there's no reason why you would choose the Cybertruck or any electric truck over a traditional, ICE truck. It doesn't have a spare tire. And most importantly, other real truck people aren't going to think you're cool, which is the reason why you buy a truck these days. I remember this was my big takeaway when I saw the Cybertruck. I just thought about truck culture, truck people, and just how much truck people are going to hate it. When you buy a truck, you can bond with other truck people. Not with this thing. I think it's important to know that the Cybertruck project isn't a rethinking of the pickup truck for pickup truck related uses. This was Tesla seeing where the lucrative truck market in America was going, that is towards the expensive luxury segment, and truck owners aren't really using trucks as trucks anymore. So sure, they'll pitch it as a pickup. In reality, it's just another gigantic luxury SUV, a luxury vehicle, by the way, with incredibly poor quality control. And so with the Cybertruck, Elon found a way to creatively jump into the big, super gigantic deluxe vehicle market with a truck that wasn't actually that great at truck stuff and would be appealing to wealthy luxury vehicle enthusiasts. This whole bulletproof exoskeleton and new alloy stainless steel, it's all just smoke and mirrors. This is just another very tech-heavy, very fast Tesla, just with a sillier design language. Anyone who thinks the whole Tesla project is about saving the planet at this point is insane. The Cybertruck is just more silly electric vehicle BS that honestly we're all becoming immune to. The hyper minimalist interior, which at this point just feels corporate and awful, the stupidly placed controls, the overuse of cameras despite having terrible visibility, and the gigantic screen where everything is ran. That's not to say it doesn't have some radical technology. The 48-volt battery thing is pretty cool. The idea of steer-by-wire kind of hurts my soul on a molecular level, not because I think it's necessarily dangerous, but because I still believe there's something special about driving a car. And maybe the steer-by-wire is a cool innovation, but is it an innovation to serve the truck as a truck? Does it actually help make for a better truck? Or will it just make things like backing up with a trailer just a worse experience? But then there's serious safety concerns, not only to those unlucky enough to be on the other side of a crash with a Cybertruck, but even for those in the vehicle. There's a reason cars aren't made of hard stainless steel anymore. And you'd think a company like Tesla would understand crumple zones. Apparently, the first major crash involving a Cybertruck and a Corolla left the Corolla completely totaled, but the person was uninjured, while the Cybertruck looks like nothing happened to it, and yet the driver had minor injuries. When your vehicle is indestructible, you take the brunt of the force versus when your car absorbs the energy. Modern automotive manufacturing is constrained by specific safety regulations to ensure this. That's why all cars and most trucks are blobs void of most fun design language. It's not that manufacturers don't want to make interesting designs, they just can't. So I'm not really sure how Tesla got around this. The Cybertruck is not available in Europe, and it never will be because it's an unsafe design, but how can it even be sold in the US? I honestly could see a class action lawsuit happening when a Cybertruck utterly obliterates a car in a way that no other vehicle could, just because of its shape and the material it's made of. And now, with all Cybertrucks being recalled and constant problems like we've never seen before with a Tesla product, one has to wonder what the future of this supposedly futuristic vehicle will look like. One thing is clear to me, at least. I believe this is probably the worst truck to ever come out of a major manufacturer. And on top of this, why would you want to own a truck from a company willing to sue you if you sell it? For me, the brooding question with the Cybertruck now is, how the heck did this thing go to production in this form and this shape? How is this legal from a major manufacturer? There was a small bit in Jay Leno's feature of the Cybertruck where Franz mentions wanting to get rid of the mirrors altogether and just, have cameras. And there's something really sinister about the way he words this. He says, and we just couldn't get the regulations changed. Not, we couldn't get it to pass regulations. No, we couldn't get the regulations changed. Did Tesla actually get specific regulations changed for the Cybertruck? Because the way he words that, it makes it sound like Tesla apparently has the power and leverage to just get these governing bodies to just change stuff when they want them to. Now, we do know that the major automotive manufacturers are somewhat in bed with groups like the EPA, for example, but how in the world did a massively heavy and sharp-edged steel-bodied vehicle pass regulations and safety standards? I don't really have an answer for that question. I do know that trucks here in the US are not really subject to the same safety standards as other passenger vehicles, despite the fact that they're almost exclusively used today as just basically passenger vehicles. And despite the fact that every Tesla model until the Cybertruck has broken records for safety standards, which is really something we should applaud them for, very little has come out about the Cybertruck's crash test ratings, which are not official. And that's pretty simply because they don't have to. It's a truck. And the early footage of testing that we've seen of the Cybertruck is somewhat alarming. No, Jason Kamiza, just because you cringily say, "Are you kidding me? We're talking about Tesla here." I don't care about the name Tesla. This vehicle is on the road now, and it has not been tested the same way other Teslas have been. Now, if you don't believe me in all of this, just look at Tesla's stock and quarterly earnings. 2024 has not been good for Tesla. The Chinese EV offerings are slowly taking over Tesla's share of the market. The stock price and earnings in general are down. The Cybertruck has also been a massive black eye for the company's reputation. They recently laid off 10% of their entire global staff, including just nixing their supercharger group, I guess, the people that sort of manage all of that. If the Cybertruck does end up failing as massively as it seems it could go down not only as the worst truck of all time, which I know some of you might laugh at, but come find me in 50 years and tell me you couldn't see this thing at the top of every worst car ever list. Is that more likely? Or is it more likely that it's a huge success and causes no problems for Tesla in terms of large-scale manufacturing and ends up paving the way for the future? I highly doubt it. But more than all of that, what if the Cybertruck ends up marking the downfall of Tesla as we know it? Tell me that story would not make sense. Maybe this move to making ridiculous, huge vehicles is Tesla's way of doing what every other major American automotive manufacturer has done, which is move away from normal cars and sedans to gigantic, expensive luxury vehicles that are easier to make because they have less safety standards. It could be. If you're looking to get a truck, just go buy an F-150, okay? You will be happy you did, I promise. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe. We'll see you in the next one. Drive safe.